The main thing is why we're here is to remember who we are. So I tell people, all the knowledge you have now, you have so much more when you're back on the other side. You remember all the stuff you already know now, plus everything you've already learned from any other lifetimes or anything else. And you come here to put it into a physical experience. On the other side, there's no physical. So I always equate that to being a doctor. If you go to college and study to be a doctor, and you never do an exam and you never meet somebody, you could still pass the test and everything else and call yourself a doctor. But until you actually put your hands on something or sit in front of another person, you're not really a doctor, So that's why we come here. We have the knowledge to be the doctor over there. We come over here to actually put that knowledge into play.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges, the brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman. My guest today is David Hanzel, and we're going to be talking about his near-death experience and his work as a medium. But first, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to all my episodes and see photos of my guests, read synopses of the episodes, little bio on myself. And there is a donate button if you'd like to support the show. It will take you to Patreon, and you will have access to some extra content. I also have a YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. You can hear the episodes there, and there's a Facebook page. My guest today is David Hanzel. David had a near-death experience, and he has since dedicated his life to being a medium and talking to the spirit world. This is one of my more esoteric guests, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. I don't know what's real and what isn't because it's a very subtle world, and I enjoy talking about this stuff. And David not only has a really fascinating story about what happened to him, but how he communicates with things he had heard as a child and shoved to the back burner because it kind of scared him a little bit and people didn't understand him. And then after this near-death experience, well, you'll hear all about it. And I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoy him. This is David Hanzel. So the best part of our little pre-recording interview, which just happened, which was David said, "I'm open to anything." So am I. So we'll see what happens. First, let's talk about your near-death experience. At what age did this happen, and was that when things changed for you, or were you able to connect with some of the unseen prior to this experience?
No, I was a goofy kid right off the bat.
Love that.
I was crazy, and I do that just because a lot of people think it's just crazy, which I get it. If somebody told me they did what I did, I'd say you're crazy. But no, it was there as a child. I hated it. I tried to drink it, drug it, do everything I can to get it out of my head. I hated it. And so I ignored it for years and years. Then in 2014, and this is part of what I'm writing for the book I'm doing, is I actually asked God to just kill me. I was just done. I didn't know what to do with it. Life was going terrible. At that point, I was drinking way too much and everything else because I didn't know what to do. And about 6 months, not even 6 months after the date that I broke down and cried and said, "God, just kill me, I'm done," I started to get sick, and then sicker and sicker. And about a month into it, my parents took me to a doctor, and he told my parents that, he goes, "Well, I just think he's got some kind of cold." And they gave me cough medicine and said he's weak because he's not eating. At that point, I was hardly walking, and they sent me back home. And 2 weeks later, I got out of bed. I made it to the family room. My little brother walked in. He said, "You don't look so good." And I just said, "I'm going to die now." And I smiled and then I went down and I woke up 2 months later. And that's, I went into a coma and everything. I was misdiagnosed with pneumonia, a real bad case of it. And I also got sepsis. So I had I had everything going on for me, a couple surgeries. And when I got out, it took me about a year to learn how to walk again, remember who kind of I was, but things changed. And I started hearing and knowing all this stuff even stronger than it was before. And basically just got the message, just do this. This is just what you came to do. It's what you wanted to do. It's what you're going to do. Just do it. And I started doing it and now it's perfect. It's fine. I wish I would have knew this a long time ago, but everything did get a little stronger afterwards.
That is amazing. How old were you when you were in the coma?
This 2015. So that wasn't long ago. I am 54 now. And so I was 49, I believe.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you were a teenager. So you were having. Wow.
No, I went my entire life screwed up until that moment. Yeah.
How long were you drugging it up and drinking? Since you were a teenager? When did you start?
Yeah, since probably about 20 years old, a little before I was 20.
Okay.
So 30, 40, 50, yeah, almost 30 years. And
okay. I get that.
I tell you, I got a beautiful gift out of going to that coma. When I came out, not only was everything stronger, which was fine, I had no recollection of drinking, smoking, or doing any drugs. None. Never had to go through withdrawals, never had to do anything. I still don't drink. I can't drink now. There's actually something wrong with my pancreas. Long story. But I don't drink. I don't remember what it's like to be drunk. I don't remember drugs. I don't remember any of the feelings. And I don't remember smoking. I don't remember any of it. That's the one thing that got wiped away. So that was really nice.
That's incredible. It's like you're a new person, essentially.
Basically, yeah. It's kind of like, I got to see a lot of stuff. I remember my dreams, most of them, as being in the coma, the time that I zonked out and died for just a moment. It was just a very quick moment. But our moment is a really long time over there.
That's what I was going to ask next. Mm-hmm. How long is that moment? Eternal, I would imagine, in some way.
On the other side, they're like they say, and you probably heard it, and it's absolutely true. There is no time. Everything happens at the same time. It's hard to comprehend now, but when you go back there, you already know this. Everybody knows it who's here. When you go back over there, you eventually remember, oh yeah, this is how it goes, really. There's no, because you don't live in a world like this. So there's no daylight, darkness. You don't have to be anywhere at any time. There's no clocks. There's no nothing. There's no aging. There's no anything. It's different, but it's not different. People get freaked out. They're like, well, I thought it's supposed to be in church. They talk about, I go to this land like Earth, and it's just like, it's like, well, yeah, you probably go there first. Cause that's one of it's a universal law, the law of belief. Yeah. You probably do see that first, but trust me, you get really bored really fast. You're like, okay, I can do so much more than just walking around a place that looks like a place I just came from.
Yeah, it falls a little short, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, it's I don't like to always tell people like my near-death experience is different than other people's. I didn't go into a light, but I did see the light from the side, and that was the most amazing thing I've ever saw in my life. It was just cool, very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking, like I always say, well, I'm looking forward to it, but not this week.
No, you're not supposed to. I mean,
right.
If people just know, my number one message to people all the time is nobody dies and you're supposed to be here. So stay here as long as you possibly can. Don't leave. It'd be silly too.
That's how I feel. I'm enjoying myself so far and most of the time. And it's what an adventure, what an adventure. The physical differences between, I mean, I know you were drinking and doing drugs, but is there something else that's changed physically? Let's go with the physical first, because obviously spiritually, metaphysically, all that.
My appearance changed quite a bit. I don't know how old I look now, but I actually look younger now than I did when I went in. I also, lots of things changed. Some of it was due to the coma part. My hair color changed. I lost almost 100 pounds within 2 months. Cause that's, basically because I wasn't eating, but it stayed off. Physically, I was also, though, another weird thing that happened for about 20 years, I was part of the Prozac Nation. So I was on every freaky drug there was. I was on prescriptions to Xanax, Klonopin, all that stuff for years and years and years.
Oh man, that's rough.
It was, and who knows? I kind of feel that if I look back on it, if I could remember, I'm like, would I take these doctors to court and say, you really screwed up people? Because there's so many other ways. I mean, I'm not discounting those drugs. Some people do need them. But doctors a lot of times will just put people on them, like me, you're talking to people, so you must be crazy. Here's a drug. You're hearing voices. You must be crazy. Here's a drug. No, I hear all those things now. When I came out, my body, I actually have zero anxiety. And I used to have anxiety attacks so bad they'd put me in the hospital. I couldn't even imagine being anxious right now. I don't even know what that is, which is odd. And I went through 20 years of it. So physiologically, my body and my brain changed as well.
That's really nice to hear. There is a propensity to over medicate people, and it's like, the quick fix and simple solution rather than, I used to have this doctor who I was telling him, I get up every night at around 2 a.m. for a little while, and I can't fall back asleep for, half an hour or whatever. He goes, "Oh, that's a spiritual problem." I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "There's something inside that is waking you up, that's bothering you, that you're not dealing with or you're not looking at." I'd never heard that before. I mean, he was pretty unconventional guy. And I thought about it quite a bit, that because it was almost a regular time that it would happen. And I would wake up with a little bit of anxiety, free floating, I guess you would call it. Yeah. There was not a lot of, sometimes there was specifics, but a lot of times it was just an agitation of something, being alive was like not happening in the way I needed it to.
I know exactly what you mean. And he is right to an extent. We'll call it the universe. People call all kinds of names, or they'll just say God, or just say Jesus, or say that. But actually it's just a whole, everything. So I'll just call it universe. The universe knows what you need, and so does your soul. So if there are problems in your life, they're going to make them known to you. They can't just tell you the problem, though. I wish they could. I wish you could just say it does your problem, but they don't. They're just giving you hints towards it in their way. And a lot of times not being able to fall asleep or having anxiety means just exactly what he said. There is something emotional you're not dealing with. The problem with people on this earth, I think, is they come here thinking that they're here to learn a lesson all the time. I'm like, God, that's so stupid. So you're going to accept everything bad to you is a lesson, and everything good to you is a lesson, and everything somebody else happened to them, it was their lesson. Okay, yeah, we do learn lessons, obviously. But the main thing is why we're here is to remember who we are. So I tell people, all the knowledge you have now, you have so much more when you're back on the other side. You remember all the stuff you already know now, plus everything you've already learned from any other lifetimes or anything else. And you come here to put it into a physical experience. On the other side, there's no physical. So I always equate that to being a doctor. If you go to college and study to be a doctor, and you never do an exam and you never meet somebody, you could still pass the test and everything else and call yourself a doctor. But until you actually put your hands on something or sit in front of another person, you're not really a doctor, Yeah. So that's why we come here. We have the knowledge to be the doctor over there. We come over here to actually put that knowledge into play. And this is how you do it.
To have that living experience, because it is different than knowledge.
You can experience your emotions. Yeah, experience your emotions. If you're mad, get mad. If you're happy, be happy. If you're shy, be shy. But the trick is to not act on some of these. So if you're going to be angry, you can be angry. And if you're angry and you think, oh, that guy pulled me over, he pulled in front of me, I wish I could get out of my car, I just want to beat the crap out of him, and you're having all these dreams about that, that's fine. You need to express that, but don't do it. That's the one thing, the problem with some people here. It's perfectly fine to have that emotion and to have that thinking. It doesn't make you a bad person. To actually put it into a physical sense could make you a quote unquote bad person.
Yeah. No, I am very pleased that people cannot read my thoughts, and I don't want to read theirs, because I know how strange and dark they can get sometimes. And you're just like, I can't believe I just thought that. But then I go, well, yeah. I did think it. I'm not doing anything about it.
You did. There's nothing wrong with thinking them. You're supposed to think them. You're just not supposed to act on them. Not all of them.
So when you were a kid and you had these experiences, and were you able to talk to anyone about it? And can you tell me some of those experiences that maybe you wanted to, that maybe freaked you out or you didn't understand? And was there anyone you could talk to?
Luckily, my mother believes in ghosts and everything else. And the reason she does is because every house growing up was haunted. So and not to the sense that they just found a haunted house. I believe that every place in the world is haunted, really. Dead people die everywhere. Why wouldn't that be? But wherever I was as a child, they would show up. So when I was a really young kid, about like 5 or 6, they would put me upstairs to bed, and there's a huge walk-in attic with 2 doors, and they would lay me down, go downstairs, and 5 minutes later, you'd hear doors opening, doors closing, doors opening, doors closing. And then I'd yell and scream to my parents, tell them that there's stuff happening. They'd go back there, check it. They said, no, the doors are locked. I'm like, no, they're not. So of course, they don't believe a 5-year-old. So I'm going through that forever. And then the one time that they totally believed me is I was awakened and the first time I saw, we'll call it a ghost. I saw it so clearly. I was at my parents' house. I was sitting on their couch. I kind of dozed off, and I woke up. I was watching TV. It was dark, and I looked across from me in the hallway, and there's a little girl, and she was just rocking kind of back and forth. And she said, David. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, who is that? And I thought it was my niece, Samantha. So I said, Samantha, be quiet. You're going to wake up mom and dad. And she just kept saying David. I could hear it audibly. I could see her. I could do everything. And then I said, Samantha, come here, get away from the mom and dad's room. And she went around the corner towards her room. So I got up to go get her, and their door was open. And I walked in and I said, where's Samantha? I said, did Samantha come in here? And my dad woke up and he goes, no, she's got school tomorrow. She was about 6 at that time, 5 or 6. She's like, she's not here. I'm like, yes, she is. She was just in the hallway. So they come out, and then I'm freaking out at this point, saying, okay, that was there. That wasn't my imagination. And then we heard a noise down in the basement all of a sudden. And then my dad quick took our dog and threw her down the steps and said, go get it, whatever it is. That's when they knew there was something going on in the house. And then when I would start to leave that house, they would hear noises upstairs in my bedroom. I was about 18 at the time, 17, 18. They'd hear noises up in my bedroom, and they'd go upstairs and there'd be nothing. And they'd come downstairs and there'd be nothing. They thought I'd be home. Then when I'd get home, they'd say, were you upstairs in your room? I'm like, no, I was at work. And they're like, there's things going on in your room. And it never scared me. I would just go back up to my room and they would stop. But as soon as I left the house, they would start again. So stuff like that happened pretty much all my life. And saw an alien when I was younger. I saw a lot of really freaky stuff, and it drove me to drink and do drugs.
Did you ever tell any friends? Like when you were, no, let's say you're loaded with a couple of friends and you're like, hey man, guess what?
Well, not a lot of them. My cousin was there for one. We had a record player unplugged from the wall and plugged back in, and we ran screaming as children. And probably it was about 20 something years later, I ran into her and we were having a drink at the bar, and I said, Pam. She goes, what? I'm like, hey, dude, was there a record player that plugged in and unplugged itself? And I thought I was making it up in my head all these years. And her eyes just went like that, and she just turned white, and she goes, yes, that did happen, didn't it? She goes, I thought it didn't happen. I said, I thought it didn't happen too. And so we both saw that. She was my proof, but I started to keep it to myself because I'd let stuff out. People would go, no, you're stupid, Dave. You don't make any sense. You're just crazy. It's all the drugs you do. It's all the drinking you do. And then in my high school friends I talk to now, they always ask me, they're like, were you like this in high school? And they said, is that why you always looked up and stared off into the distance? I said, yeah, because they were constantly talking to me. Constantly. I'd just be sitting there and I thought it was normal. I thought everybody heard them, so I'd just be like, quiet. My friends are going to pick up,
Man. And you didn't feel like you felt that it was not like you were, did you feel like you were nuts, or did you feel like this is real, but nuts. I can't go ahead. I'm sorry.
I didn't feel like I was nuts until people told me I was nuts.
Okay.
I thought it was perfectly normal. It scared me a little when I was a child, just the noises and them showing up all the time. But it didn't scare me until people said that wasn't normal. And then I'm like, okay, if that's not normal, then there's something wrong with me. And then that's how you go about. That's how most of us start out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I was wondering if how many kids actually shut that off completely, or maybe aren't as sensitive as you were. I wonder if your sensitivity drew more of that to you, or it's around, let's say it's all around me right now, and I'm just not tuned to it, because you said every house you were in was had this. So was it because were they drawn to you?
Probably, most likely. Some people, I've had people tell me, well, that's because you're a physical medium, but I don't practice physical mediumship. I mean, I think it's very real. But they do use people and they do come around a lot for certain people. I mean, the other side knows any ghost over there, ghost, spirit, God, anybody, they know what you can hear and what you can't hear and what you can see and what you can't see when you're here. So it's kind of like, people are like, well, how come ghosts just always talk to you? And I'm like, well, I guess to them, it's like if they could see me from it's like they see this light glowing off me. So if they see that light, they're like, aha, he can hear us. So they'll chat. And that's basically really that simple. And if you shut off, if you're opened up to anything in this world, you will experience things. Everybody has a guide. Everybody has an angel, whether they believe in God, don't believe in God, it doesn't matter. There's no such thing as being alone. You can't be alone. Even if you lock yourself up and pray to be alone, you can't be alone. There's always a spirit or an energy with you.
Yeah, well, you can feel it. I mean, and I'm certainly not somebody that, sees and hears things. My only experience really has been, not only, but mostly in dreams, is where I have contact with, I've had experiences. I wouldn't even call them just dreams. They're experiences that are hyper real in the dream state. And when I wake up, they're still with me in a way that's significant. And I'll tell you one in particular. When my father passed away, not that long ago, a few years ago, I felt that he had not crossed over to where he was, and he was struggling with it because he was somebody who just absolutely was afraid to die. He wasn't afraid to be dead. He was afraid that the process was going to be painful, which he was wrong about that. But he was having a lot of trouble. He was 94 and he just didn't want to let go. And he was having trouble. And when he passed away, I could feel it. And so could my sister, that he was not, and a lot of religions talk about that it takes a number of days for the whole soul to cross over. And he came to me in a dream one night, and I was sitting in a parlor of a house, not my house. It was just some sort of old fashioned kind of house with a wooden banister. And there was a curtain, and the curtain opened, and my grandfather, who was my mother's father, who died when I was 16, came down the stairs, and he stood there and he looked at me very matter-of-factly, and he looked up the stairs. And my father came down the stairs, and he was like 35 years old, maybe. He was the young version of my dad that I remember when I was a child. Biggest smile on his face. My grandfather had helped him, is what it felt like. And he gave me this big hug, and we hugged, and it was this beautiful moment where he was like, I'm okay now. I'm in a great place. And I got up that morning, and I called my sister and I told her what happened. And it was just, it happened. It wasn't a dream. It happened in some other dimension that in between a dream and a wake.
I'll tell you, don't ever slough off those dreams, because people don't realize how many times a week their loved ones come and say hi to them. And it's because it's the easiest time when you're sleeping. So those dreams are always real.
See, the next thing I was going to say is that I've had these dreams about my grandfather and my dad, who was my mother's father, the grandfather, and my mother passed away 3 years before my dad. And I've had no contact that way. I don't feel her the way I feel my dad, and there's no difference in how much I love them or any of that stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I would like to have some sort of a.
It could be a number of things, and trust me, if any of those two come in, I'll do it. I didn't put out the intention for it, but sometimes I do anyway. I mean, there could be very different reasons why you don't feel your mother as much. One, she might not further away. When I say further away, I don't mean distance, but further away, I mean, she might have been, because I have the funny feeling that your father had a more stronger belief system than mom did, for whatever reason, why they were here. Like, she let her belief system go. And I think that she's just all over the place, doing all kinds of things. She's not stuck in that one place, because that's just her. Where he seems like, oh no, I'm really cool where I am right now. This is all wonderful right here. I'm in no hurry to move on to any place. He just seems like he wants to take his time in that one. That's just how I feel. That's a lot of times what can happen. If one of the souls, they lose their beliefs. You know what I mean? When you leave here and you go over there, you lose that. I mean, you don't care about anything. You don't care. Like, I'm not worried about somebody because I know they're going to be fine. I know they're fine. And I know this is just a moment in history they're going through. And if they go over with that belief and realize that right away, then they can move on and do other things. But a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that they're not around. It really doesn't, because they still do visit you. I'm sure she does. I am sure, probably 100% sure that your mother still visits you. You just don't remember.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
It's just not as evident or strong to me for whatever reason. I'm not that worried about it. Well, I'm not worried about it at all, but I was very curious because I was having so many with my dad, and I had him very intensely with my grandfather when he died. That's been probably the most consistent thing. Every
one of my grandparents, not long after they died, they visited me, except for one. And I didn't hear from him forever. I mean, even like my step grandmother, I like, it was like moments afterwards, basically, that she did, until when I was in the coma, though. Those four all greeted me in one place. Just like you said, you had that. They all greeted me in one place, and they were all together. And I never felt the reason to ask my grandfather, the one grandfather, why he never showed up. I never bothered to ask him. It just felt like he just had stuff to do. But I know that he was also, he was a deacon at a church and all this other things. So if he went over with that belief system, and when he got there with that belief system, and there was a very strong Baptist, and he knew that I was a medium or whatever, that might be something he would have shied away from, because you do keep that personality for a while when you go over. That's why I named my website They Whisper to Me. I mean, they literally, it's like a whisper. Sometimes it's so subtle that you just have to pay attention, And all you got to do is give permission. That's the biggest thing. I always tell people, I asked God for this, and I asked God for that, and I asked the angels for this. And I'm like, well, they answered you. And sometimes the answer is no. And then sometimes they say, well, yeah, you can have this, but there's a strict law. There's one strict law in the entire universe for every alien, everything, is that free will. Nobody doesn't have free will. Even animals have free will. Bugs have free will. Everything has free will. So unless you give permission for them to infringe on your free will, they can't do anything. They won't do anything. They'll save your life if they need to, if it's gonna, hurt somebody else's, that you're here. Because it might, like, say it's not time for you to die, but a car's coming straight at you. But if you got hit, it'd be really terrible for your wife or your kids at this point. So they're like, we'll move him out of the way somehow, because they don't want you to go. That's about the only time that they'll interfere.
Yeah, we were talking about that on another podcast where you just have this sense of like, I better not step off the curb right now. And you don't know why, because you're not seeing or hearing anything, but you just kind of,
Yeah, you got to pay attention. Pay attention to that stuff. I tell you, it's a gold mine out there of information if you just listen. And you don't have to be psychic or a medium or anything else. People always go, how do I be a medium? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think you really want to. It's really not that great sometimes, but if you want to be, you put out the calling. And that's exactly what happens. I came in with the calling and I was ignoring it. And that's what happens when you go against something that's so strong. They're like, nope, you're going to do this.
Well, that is I think a truism in terms of being a human being, is that the body never lies. It's not capable of lying. So if you're going against your nature, and your body is going to tell you some way. And in your case, it was very severe, obviously, the near-death experience in order to wake you up.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
The hardest part was the coma. That was the hardest part, probably. I was well aware.
You were aware while you were in the coma of what was going on?
I was aware I was not waking up. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could hear too, I would imagine, because I think.
Yeah, because that's how we discovered. That's what they freaked out the most about when I started telling them stuff. They're like, how did you know that? They kept asking, how did you know that? I'm like, because I saw you do it. And they're like, well, you were passed out at that time. I'm like, well, no, I wasn't. I mean, to them, it's really odd, but to them, I was on a bed with my feet looked like elephant feet, and I had tubes running in and tubes down my esophagus, everything else. But for me, I could see them. Sometimes I saw them from the point of view of the bed, and sometimes I saw them just like walking around the room. Because and that wasn't even death. That was just coma. I mean, we leave our bodies all the time.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
All the time. Yeah.
I have a friend, when her son was, I don't know, what age can you start drawing at? 3 or 4, maybe?
Yeah. Well,
and he was little. He was little, and he drew a picture of the piano from the top, looking down, that view. And he had never been above the piano, obviously, physically, but he saw it and he drew it.
Yeah.
Pretty great. Now, cool? Here's something that happened the other night. I want to talk to you about this because you said ask you anything, and
ask me anything.
I've never had this experience before. I was laying in bed and I started to speak these. Well, I guess you would call them. They're not English. They weren't in English or any language that I knew. They were words, and the voice was different than mine. It was a little bit deeper. And I was saying these words going, I wonder if these mean anything. I mean, obviously they do to me somewhere in my brain. And I go, is this just me kind of like being, strange? Because I do like to be a little strange sometimes, but I wasn't planning it and I wasn't trying to do it. It was happening, but it was clear. And the words were, the best way I could put it is ancient, but I don't know what they were. It was such an interesting experience. And I went, oh, I wish I wasn't so tired. I would write this stuff down, or if I had a tape recorder, it would have been cool.
You're almost in a hypnagogic state. Does that make sense at that point? Okay.
A little bit.
You're probably just entering. You're starting to remember, and your body, and you're starting to replay it out. You should do it again. If you put in the intention and lay down and just don't say the words or anything, just sit there with the intention saying, I want to do this moment again. They said that it should start right back up. You're remembering something, and it's not remembering this life. It's remembering past life. So you're remembering something from past, not from this. That's how they keep putting it. So, and I'm like, past birth? Yes, past birth. So
What does
people
that
always
mean?
think there's
What does
no
that mean? Past birth. What does that mean?
People always think that birth is the beginning, and it's not. There's way more before birth. So this is past birth. So probably life before.
Yeah, pre-birth is the same thing you're saying.
Life, birth, yeah. They just always tell me past birth. That's how I hear it.
Well, that's interesting.
That's just how they tell it to me, or how I hear it. Past birth means, you know how we want to go past life into the future? Turn that this way, go towards birth, and go past that.
Mhm.
That's how you go back into the lives you had before, or what you were before, which is difficult. And that's just kind of a signpost, because everyone is all that there ever is, ever was, and ever will be. So it's like you always were. So it's hard to go to it's hard to pinpoint. So they always say past birth for me.
Okay.
Past
Now
life.
I have done several past life regressions with hypnotherapy, and it was really powerful and great, and I loved it. And I want to keep doing more.
Yeah, I don't look into people's past lives much.
Yeah.
But they tell me that. But anyway, no, you can say that. Thank you. No, okay, sorry. Go back and remember that. They said, here's a hint. You're talking to a female. Whatever you're saying, maybe try to look up the words and see what those words were.
Yeah, I can't remember them. So,
if you can get them again, write them down, look them up. They said you were speaking those to a female when those words were spoken. So hopefully it wasn't anything like I'm going to kill you or anything like that. So
no, it definitely was not. There was no malice or hatred or anything like that. It was rather just sort of almost like, I want to say religious of some kind. It was,
I think you're speaking to a female, whatever that means. Female doesn't mean that it had to be a love affair. It could have been a mother, it could have been a sister, It could have been a peasant girl, it could have been anything. But yeah, they just said that you can recount that. I would give it a try. Usually when they say something like that, you usually do it within a day or two.
I am looking forward to it. This is like one of the most interesting podcasts I've done, because I'm actually having a little bit of an experience with the guest in a way that I haven't ever. So that's really great. I love this.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I always tell people whenever I do like, I'll do like platform readings, or, you've seen like the medium stand up, or, and there's a bunch of people there and you do these readings. Whenever I do those, I always tell people when I'm done, you really don't need me. I'll be there to validate stuff that you need, but I am not high above anybody else with any privilege to talk to a spirit. Anybody can talk to their own loved ones. I mean, maybe you might not be able to talk to, the guy at the castle you're investigating, but you will be able to talk to any one of your relatives, friends that died. They are always there for you. You don't need a medium for that. It's just some people, they don't trust what they hear or think in their head. So that's why they need a medium to validate stuff.
I was just wondering as you were just talking, whether obviously there's a desire for people to have that kind of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Is it I think a lot of people think it's a manufactured thing out of a desperation to stay connected with somebody who's died. That could be one explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Or the draw is so great because it's very real and we've lost the ability to tap into it. And that's what I prefer to.
We have it. Your second part is absolutely true. It is very real. And people have just lost the ability. And it's not, we didn't really lose the ability. We just forgot. Like I said, this life is about remembering. All we did was forget how to do it, because we've been talking to dead people for thousands of years. I mean, how do you think the Bible got written? It was channeled to somebody who interpreted it another way and put it in a book. And that's how it happened. And, so when even like when religious people talk about we're doing the devil's work or whatever, it's like, well, how do you think your book got written? You kept saying it was God, and he didn't physically come down here and write it and hand it to somebody. So he put it through somebody. So I always tell people, if you don't want to think of it as mediumship, think of it as inspiration, spiritual inspiration,
mm-hmm.
which is basically how I put it. I mean, sometimes I'll have a actual thing here standing next to me that I can see it with my eyes. I can describe it. I can do everything. But then sometimes I just have their intention that comes into my head, and I know it's not my stuff. They've had me say things that I'm like, I would never say that.
Part of it seems to me when you when people are, skeptics or find it to be, like you said, the devil's got a hold of you kind of
Yeah.
thing. But when you look back and you think about so-called primitive cultures, this was just part of the culture, this type of thing, that you could communicate, and then the line between the living and the dead was very blurred, if it existed at all, in a sense.
Yeah.
And I just came to this, that it was created. This idea of the devil was created by religions to put a stop to that kind of thinking, because that gives people spiritual access. But if the people leading these religions have the only access or the final vote in this stuff, then they have control.
Suspiciously enough, you are absolutely correct. But I got to add something to it. Nobody has to believe me, but I'm going to tell you something. This used to be it used to be a matriarchal society, actually, long time ago, before I remember. So it was pretty much women ran everything. The female side, or the yin side, whatever, was the side that was kind of in control, So men were basically just baby makers and to do things, to get stuff. That's all they were, pretty much. I mean, women were in control. After that went on for a long time, men started to change that. That's where religions started coming in and everything, more strong. And that's where devils and all that came in, because it scared the women. Apparently, this is what they say. I mean, not over there. These are things I've written, but they said it was exactly what you said. It was made up. The devil was made up to pretty much keep people in line. I mean, I can tell everybody here right now, and I'm not afraid to say it. There is no such thing as hell. There's none, just none. There's no real hell. There's no real purgatory. There's no real anything like that.
Well, have you ever spent an hour with an insurance salesman?
Yeah, yeah, there's hell. Now, there is something, like I said, called the law of belief. And the law of beliefs states whatever you believe, you get. That's what you get. So when you die, be careful of what your belief system is. That's why you get these people who had a near-death experience going, I burned in hell for saying the swear word. That's because that's all you see. I didn't have a religious upbringing. I had nothing to base mine off of. I didn't go to some beautiful earthy place that looked like this. Mine was totally different, and it was cool, and I loved it. So I don't, the devil is made up. Like you said, it keeps people in line. And I think people are still fearing that. My grandmother once said to me, if you don't believe in hell, what makes you want to be a good person? And I said, well, I get off on it. I like being a good person. If you need threats to be a good person, then you're not a good person to begin with.
Right. It feels right. That's why you do it. It's like you just feel better when you act that way.
Yeah. And every human being knows this.
Absolutely.
But you either go with it or go against it. It's not a big deal.
The very first episode I did of this podcast, I wanted to start at the end of life. Why I, had that idea of like, let's start at the end. So I interviewed a guy, a nurse who was in end of life, palliative care, that field. So he had spent a lot of time with people who were dying, and he told me this story, which is really about how powerful the mind is, as you were saying. If you believe it, it's there. So there was a guy who was dying in the hospital that he was in charge of, helping him. And he had prescribed, he had some terrible, cancer, and he had prescribed morphine and all these things. And he shows up at the hospital one day, and the guy he hears this screaming down the hall, absolute agonizing, horrific pain, like a wounded animal. And he goes to the nurse's station, and he sees that all the prescriptions are correct. And he asks the head nurse, what's going on? He won't take the medicine. He doesn't want it. So he goes in and he does a meditation and calms the guy down enough to speak with him. And it turns out that the guy told him that he had murdered somebody when he was younger. It's a crazy story, a powerful story. Mm-hmm. And that he felt that if he was not to spend the rest of his life in purgatory, if he could minimize his stay there, the way to do that would have an agonizing death as to pay for what he had done earlier in his life. And he wouldn't take the medication, and that's how he died, with a lot of pain.
Gosh.
And he was able to endure, with doctors saying, take this, it'll relieve you. He was able to endure that level of absolute excruciating pain because he believed that it was going to do something for him. And maybe he was right. I don't know.
And I can't sit here and tell you that I know each and every person's story, because death is very personal. I will say this. Wow. It really sucks that he didn't realize that whether you murder 20 people here, one person here, whether it's by accident or anything, you don't go to hell, but you are with your own vibration. So if there was, most likely what textbook, what would have happened to him, spiritual textbook, would be when he left here, he would have to, that memory would not go away. He would have to confront that memory. He would have to confront everything around it, confront that person, confront all of that. And it wouldn't be a bad thing. And he wouldn't have to go to jail or anything like that, but he has to be in that mindset until everything is solved. And it's a karmic thing. Hey, he might have killed that person because karmically it needed to be done. Because that person may have killed him in a life before, and they decided, let's swap this. We need to see how this is like, because that's basically all karma is. It's an exchange it's a balance of experience. Mm-hmm. So if you do something with somebody, there's something karmic behind it. He might have a karmic debt now to pay off to the gentleman or the person that he killed when he was here. Now, karmic debt, people think that that's some terrible thing, and it's not. It just means you need to experience that situation you put that person in if you don't already know it, because souls are curious by nature. We want to learn everything. I mean, look at it this way. You have eternity. What are you going to do? Learn everything. Learn everything you possibly can about everything and everyone in every situation, every gender, every color, everything. You want to know it. You want to know what it was like to be on their side at that moment. So some souls also, like him, prefer to feel the pain of death, or they want to experience it. Most people don't. I can tell you that. Right after the hospital, I got on a moped and I was driving 30, a light changed. I was disorientated. I threw on the brakes. The back brake didn't work, only the front brake. So I flew up out into the air into the middle of an intersection. This is like a month after I got out of the hospital. And I blacked out. I felt myself rise up, and I remember the words. I said to myself, I'm like, so this is how it ends. And
after all that.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. What did you do? What kind of crap did I pull? But I 10 seconds after that, it literally felt like somebody was holding me and laid me down. And I opened my eyes after they laid me down, and a girl stood in front of me and she said, dude, don't move. I'm like, what? She goes, you flew off your bike. They're on their way. The ambulance is on the way. And I was just laying there. No pain, zero pain. And I had shattered my left clavicle, and my whole entire face was scarred up along with my body and my chest. But that's the only damage that happened to me. But I didn't feel anything. So I didn't feel anything after I got sick and went into the coma. I didn't feel anything either. No, there's no pain whatsoever. There's no pain in death. There's only pain in before death. And some people choose to feel it. People say, well, why do you want to feel what it's like to get eaten by an alligator alive? I don't know. Maybe they did.
Yeah. I think I would pass on that.
Yeah. For the most part, though, there's something really cool that I believe in, and it's called the promise of heaven. That's what we call it, or that's what me and my guides call it. And all that states is this: if there is absolutely no reason for you to go through any of that pain, you're taken right beforehand. So let's say you and me are in a car, and we're in a car, and we're driving down the road at about 200 miles an hour, and there's a big brick wall, and the brakes go out. So we're going to inevitably hit that wall. Most of the time, if me and you didn't decide that we need to feel that pain at that moment, we're taken before we even get there. And everybody else, and even though it looked like we could have survived it or died in a big fire, our soul is actually gone. The body can move without the soul in it. That happens to animals a lot. When you see an animal get hit by a car and it kind of mushed and sitting there, that animals leave like this. Animals do not stay in their bodies. They go, boom. People are a little bit more stubborn. I wish it was that easy for us, but it's not. A lot of us overthink even after death.
Well, please no.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you think you're having a hard time oversleeping and not, overthinking and not being able to go to sleep, if you start overthinking when you die, it's like, oh, do I stay here? Do I go? I don't know what that light is. Who's that dude in the pants? Why is Abraham Lincoln standing here? I need to leave.
I like the phrase, who's that dude in the pants?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Oh no. And I'm a curious person. I hope I'm not just thinking my way for.
But to make, I just always want to tell people, don't fret this death thing. We're all going to go. You've done it a million times before. It's just like breathing. It's not any different. It's literally like getting up out of a chair and going into another chair in another room. That's all it is.
That was my experience with the past life regression, because the person took me, to the end of this life that we were talking about. And when I came out of the whole experience, and I was very aware of the whole experience. Yeah. It wasn't like it was in some, I knew exactly everything. I remembered everything. But the first thing she said to me, she goes, "Isn't death so not a big deal?" Yeah. And that was the best takeaway I had from it, because, the experience was amazing and I did learn some things, but that alone was so freeing. It took so much fear out of the whole experience. So let's talk about your website for a second. If people want to, contact you and find out more about what you're doing, because that's always a good thing to have a guest lay it out there for people.
Well, the website is called They Whisper to Me, theywhispertome.com. You can find out my reading. I do all kinds of different readings. Because some people, they don't want to pay a lot of this money for an hour-long reading or stuff. So I have email readings. I have question readings. I do dragon readings, dragon oracle readings. I do channeled angel readings. Those are $11.11. And people always go, "Why aren't you charging more money for that?" And it's this simple. When they told me how to do this and what to do, that was the agreed upon price. And it always has been, and it always will be. And it doesn't, you don't even have to ask a question. All you got to just say is, angel reading. It just states your name. It pretty much gives me permission. And then I sit down and I channel whatever they say. And more times than not, everybody writes back and says, "How did you know?" I'm like, "I didn't. They do. I don't know." But I do stuff like that. So that's the website. And then I have a podcast called Mystic Stew, where I just talk about all kinds of stuff. I just did one today on animals. So that's on the record.
Oh, okay. Mystic Stew. That's a great title. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just a hodgepodge lodge of spiritual, metaphysical. I talk to some of my friends who are just as freaked out and funky as I am. And we're all most of my friends are very down to earth. We don't believe in that airy fairy stuff.
Yeah, I know that's rough to be around sometimes. 1111. Why that price? Because, my wife is really into the number 11. I don't know why. And today is 2/11/21. Interesting. Numerical thing today.
Interestingly enough, it's an angel number. 1111. And that's why I charged $11.11, because I kept waking up. I'm like, "What do I do?" They're like, "You're going to just channel us." And I'm like, "I don't know how to voice channel, right now." And I do voice channel, but I didn't know at the time at all. And they're like, "No, you're pretty much just going to look at the name and put on this music and we'll type for you." And basically that's what they do. They don't actually move my fingers, but they put the thoughts in my head. Some of my angel readings, I think, are on the website too, as well. And they don't talk like me at all. I talk like a sailor half the time. I'm not very good at being a spiritual, all holy person. I'll swear when I want to swear. I'll burp if I want to burp. I don't care. I'm just Dave first and foremost. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But when they do angel readings, they talk so beautifully and so eloquently. And 1111 means whenever you see the number 11, especially, or you see 111 or 111 or 1111, any of that, pay attention to your thoughts at that moment. It's very important for you to pay attention to the thought you have. They're trying to tell you they monitor your thoughts, let's say. That sounds like infringement, but it's not. They pay attention to your thoughts. If you're thinking really good thoughts and you see 1111, that is validation to go with. That's the joy or the place you want to be at that moment. If it's something bad and you see the 1111, whatever, that means pay attention to that thought. Try not to have it because it could totally come true because you create your own life. I mean, we choose everything that's happening to us on this life. The only thing that is kind of out of our control is collectively we decided this is earth, there's wind, there's water, there's rain, there's earthquakes. I mean, that's just a gimme. Can't always control that. But everything else, it's all you. Your experiences are all you. Whatever you want to do, you can do. I mean, we know now anybody can be president. I mean, that's a funny thing, but I mean, we know anybody can do anything if they put their mind to it. Yeah. Now, there's consequences of doing exactly what you want, but nonetheless, you're able to. And when you see 1111 happening, that's telling you, pay attention to your thoughts. So that's probably why she's getting 11 a lot.
I can't wait to tell her about this because she's always been, for years, she goes, it's 11 again. She'll look at the clock, 111. 211, whatever. That's
also in my, this is my personal opinion. She's also got a real strong male angel around her. And I don't like to say male or female angel because they're erogenous. They don't really have sexes anyway. Yeah. But they do
androgynous.
Androgynous. I'm sorry. Did I say erogenous?
Yeah. I like them both.
Yeah. But they don't really have a physical, male or female, but they do have energies of male or female. But the energy is really strong male energy.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, David. And I will. Oh,
you're very welcome. It was an absolute pleasure.
Talk to you again. Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Thanks for listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, The Exploding Human Facebook page. And if you'd like to donate, you can go to patreon.com/theexplodinghuman, or you can go to the website and hit the donate button and support the show, and you will have access to some extra content. Really appreciate that. Thanks to David Hanzel once again, and have a great day. Thanks.